This one is a very special episode of the Enterprise GTM podcast. Our guest today is Diwakar Goel, Global Head of Data at BlackRock. As someone who has worked at data infrastructure companies and is invested in some amazing ones, I've always wanted to know what it takes to build a truly enterprise-scale AI data platform that powers a Wall Street giant like BlackRock, which essentially lives and breathes data. And this is exactly what Diwakar and I discuss. We unpack the tech, strategy, and philosophy behind enterprise data architecture. From automation at scale to building trust in AI, this is a masterclass in future-proofing enterprise data that you don't want to miss. Diwakar, we are so excited to have you here in the podcast today. Diwakar Goel is the Global Head of Data at BlackRock. Diwakar, welcome, and please tell us a bit about yourself.
First of all, thanks, Vidya, for having me. Just a quick background. I've been now in BlackRock for around 4 years and joined from G before that, where I used to be the Global Chief Data Officer. My role in BlackRock is twofold. BlackRock also has a SaaS solution, which is called Aladdin, which powers, obviously, BlackRock's investment process, but also powers a lot of the large firms worldwide. And I also had data for Aladdin.
Wow, awesome. That's fantastic. So you have both a role for your internal customer base, so to speak, as well as you have external facing customers. That is definitely a lot on your plate, I guess. Cool. Well, so now, as our regular listeners might recognize, Diwakar is a very unique kind of guest for this podcast in that, generally speaking, our guests usually come from the world of startups. And here there is Diwakar. He has such an interesting and valuable part of this ecosystem that many of our founders would love to do business with at some point. We think it's pretty valuable to hear his point of view of the world. So founders who want to do business with the likes of BlackRock can better prepare themselves for that. So with that in mind, let's dig a little deeper into your world. Diwakar, you mentioned you have a couple of unique roles within BlackRock. Can you please double click on the scale and scope of your responsibility? So as an example, could you please unpack for the audience, for the internal customers that you're servicing, could you tell us a little bit about what is the mix of team, maybe even stack, the technical stack that you all use internally, and similar question externally speaking for the Aladdin product? What does that look like in terms of what is the team that constitutes the people who are building it, managing it, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So, Vidya, I think as you think about BlackRock, the role that I have and the team has is basically providing them the platform that they require to run their different data workloads. Obviously, as you think about BlackRock, we have a variety of teams internally that use data as a core, right? We always say that investment management is an information processing business. So fundamentally, data is the main fuel that kind of runs the investment process. These teams vary. Some of them are research-oriented teams. They are looking at generating alpha. Some of them are core operational teams. So, the goal is to obviously provide them the platform, provide them some of the core data sets that they need. And then we also operate in a little bit of a federated fashion for the house, right? There are some of the data teams within those core investment teams, which are also then leveraging the common data platforms and data assets and analytics, then to build on top of it for what is needed for their investment process, right? So I think we genuinely believe in a data mesh architecture. And I think that's kind of pretty much rooted in how we've designed our ecosystem for the house. When you think about Aladdin, right? And I think there is two flavors of it, right? One, obviously, as a SaaS provider, analytics is one of our biggest secret sauce. One of the reasons why people prefer Aladdin and use Aladdin. We actually are pretty deep into the quant space and we generate a lot of quant. We also are now extending Aladdin into a platform. And think of the platform as where we're not only trying to provide them a SaaS, but a kind of a PaaS where they're able to build on top of it. They're also able to use that to bring their own data set into that ecosystem so that they can power the investment process as well as some of the adjacent processes that sit around them. The other thing, which perhaps hopefully is interesting to the startup community, as of March 3rd, we closed the acquisition of Prickwin. And Prickwin is basically a data provider. It's in the private market space. So it has all the data of the different startup companies, the fund managers, the investors, and it really brings all of them together into the community. So the goal is also to really have the stack and support for us as a data provider in that space. Now, you asked a little bit on the technology, and I think we go through all the spectrum. But I think if you ask me, from the core data warehousing platform, we do use Snowflake, and we are pretty big on Snowflake. We are Azure shop largely, but we also have different components of other cloud as we're becoming more multi-cloud in our nature. Then we have what we've been building as an enterprise data platform, which is supports from your structured workloads to unstructured workloads. We can name the stack, but we have a variety of tech that is supporting our acquisition, our unstructured ecosystem, our governance. We do use a lot of open source Vidya, so that is big for us. So you're going to see, while we use some proprietary software, like for example Fivetran for CDC and others, we are pretty heavy on open source. For example, for metadata, we use Data Hub, which is the open source project by LinkedIn and others, right?
Got it. Wow. Thank you so much for you provided a lot of color about both the internal platform and architecture. So noted that you've embraced the data mesh architecture, several open source technologies, all in the service of trying to service a multitude of personas, it sounds like, and use cases as it relates to the internal platform. And then when it comes to Aladdin, there too, you're trying to bring in data from different sources, and you're going from being just a data platform to a platform as a service. So it looks like you're really evolving it to a whole another level on the Aladdin side. So that's really, really fascinating.
And
And
I think the one thing that you said, Vidya, if I latch on to it, because I think that's a key. I think we all are rappelling to two spectrums. And what I mean by that is, at one end, you are trying to enable what you call as your citizen developers. At the other end, you have your core IT professionals. In our industry, you want to enable fast research and you want to avoid alpha decay. A lot of us built and designed outcome oriented ecosystem. And while
Mhm.
that outcome oriented ecosystem served well, I think given how the different persona, the different use cases have been growing, I think there's a constant challenge for you to be innovating yourself. So I think what we've taken really is a core platform oriented approach. And then we've been layering outcome orientation on top of it.
Gotcha. And hence why you've hinged on data mesh as a principle, I suppose, in an architectural framework. And then you're layering on other tools and technologies that can support this spectrum of users and use cases that you want to service on your platform. You don't want to basically say no just because some citizen developer shows up, or you want to get into a new market. You want to enable a very broad spectrum of people, use cases, and markets on your platform. You want to have all this flexibility built in.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Wow, it sounds like a very, very tough challenge to tackle. Yeah. And when we think about, and I know we are talking about like an internal versus an external team and products that you're servicing. Just curious to know the rough mix of different people, like technical people supporting these platforms, data scientists, developers,
Yeah.
data engineers, ML engineers. Like maybe you can talk about it as an internal versus external split. I'm curious to know, what is your team composed of?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've done as we've organized a team is we have actually organized around core verticals that a lot of people in the data community will resonate to. So we have data platform, we have data engineering, we have data science, we have operations of different kind, we have stewardship and governance, and obviously client implementation and stuff like that. So I think my team is responsible for the end to end of data. So we have all the different teams. We also have, I would say, a meaningful, sizable operations team, just because as a data provider, you have a meaningful, sizable data team, as well as for the kind of data and analytics we produce and handle. I think the fidelity of the quality there is very important that we support. But I think the split is roughly around 30%, which is tech oriented talent. And just to give you a magnitude, like my team is around 30 to 3,300 people. So I have around 30% people who are from the tech background, which comprises all the way from platform to engineering to data science to all those aspects. And it spans both public market and private market. And then you have around 50 to 55% people in the operational bucket. And I think operation, we divided between core operation and also research. Because, like, if you think about as we become a data provider, a lot of what we do is data research and trying to figure out what's right versus like typical operation, as you would think. And then you have 15%, which is focused on core domain expertise, which is the data stewardship, implementation, and go to market and things like that.
Gotcha. I think you said about 3,300 people. Did I hear that right in terms of team size?
That's
Wow.
correct.
Got it. And then the tech oriented part of the team that you mentioned, does that include data engineering, platform engineering, all those kinds of roles as well?
Yes. It is
Okay.
platform engineering, data modeling. So all of those roles.
Got it. And then you called out data stewardship in the last bucket of about 15% that you mentioned. So
Correct.
does that also like include security, privacy, all those different aspects as it relates to data?
There are two parts of security and privacy. I think what we do is, I genuinely believe, especially for things like security, privacy, governance, we need to take a more platform oriented approach. Because I think if that's not embedded in the platform and how we operate, it's very tricky for the scale and size of what we do to feel
Hmm.
comfortable that you are in control. So a lot of our security, privacy, governance, all of that aspect is embedded in what we've designed as our core platform itself. And then there is governance on top of it that sits in the stewardship function. So I think it's a combination of those two that really brings those aspects to life.
Hmm. Yeah. And this is fascinating for me, Diwakar, to hear from you. Clearly, you've done something which I think, from what I can tell in talking to other chief data officers at large enterprises, even they struggle with when it comes to implementing security, privacy, governance at scale, especially if they have not thought about it from the beginning, right? I mean, a lot of enterprises, like it or not, they don't have the security and privacy policies from the get go, but they're sitting on treasure troves of data, and they know
Right.
they now have to secure it and secure it fast because A, there are a lot of people who want to like monetize it, use it to drive the business forward. And B, there is a plethora of applications that can take advantage of data, including AI. So I guess one of the biggest issues they typically tend to run into is that, like you correctly pointed out, in order to have this done consistently and at scale, it has to start at the platform level. It
Correct.
can't be a bolt on. Did you always have that in place at BlackRock, or was this an initiative that happened at some point? Like, could you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. Actually, some of the credit I'll give beyond before my time. Part of it is, as we are Aladdin as a platform which serve ourselves as well as of a lot of our clients which are in the same industry. I think how we maintain security and confidentiality of the data and how we make all our clients comfortable that their data is contained in the right ecosystem was a big design principle for us to be successful as a SaaS enterprise. So a
Hmm.
lot of that is rooted in how we've designed tenancy, how we've designed client data isolation, how we've designed a lot of those concepts right at the fabric of how we built Aladdin, right? So that's definitely been there. Now, I think as obviously, especially when we think about the house and how data has obviously grown in terms of its usage, we have continued to take that principle and evolve as we build the platform. For us, if you think about with some of the areas which are more tricky and challenging that we've spent time on designing is things like entitlement, right? We are
Hmm.
one of the largest consumer of third party data from the market, right? We don't need to only manage entitlements for us as consumer, which typically for data officers that are solving, they know it's a tough challenge. We need to actually manage entitlement on behalf of all our clients and their licensing and how they use the data and what they
Hmm.
should be provisioned for, right? So some of these problems are highly nuanced and complex. So we, by virtue of it, had to really invest in it and get ahead of the problem. Otherwise, there is no way you can meaningfully tackle that problem. And I think the other thing, and I don't know if I should say this, like I have a very, very small and lean actual governance team. It is single digits. because I genuinely believe like if you're doing governance as after the thought, like no matter what you do, you will never be able to keep up to it.
That is very well said, indeed. And obviously, you've been very thoughtful about making sure that this platform from the get go, because you obviously have external clients and engendering trust among them is so paramount for your business. You've thought through a lot of this from first principles from the get go. That is really unique and amazing. And just switching topics to, I mean, obviously we're talking about a lot of things which you're doing at massive scale at BlackRock. When I, factor in, you mentioned about 50 to 55% of your team is involved in all kinds of like operations. You and I know that sometimes it's unfortunately one of the thankless jobs of all things data, right? You're not building some fancy application that an executive can look at and appreciate, but it can be pretty onerous, consuming a lot of time, involves drudgery. As a leader, how do you go about securing resources, especially for that side of your house? Like, are you trying to think about like getting more out of the team or speed of innovation? Like, how do you go about securing budgets for both people as well as for new tools that they come to you with?
Yeah, I think, with it, it's actually a challenging thing. And this is where we've invested a lot of time and energy and resources over the last 4 years, 5 years, I've been here. So one of the things we've done really is we've really thought about, and I'll use an analogy hopefully that relates. We actually deliver something every morning which is known as green package, and the green package is basically a bundle of analytics that all our investment professionals look at in the morning, and then they decide on investment decisions they need to make, right? This is, if you can factor in, like it takes
Mhm.
everything that has happened over the previous day, all the market movements, generate a set of analytics bottoms up, and provides you all the rich analytics every day, right? So it is kind of a secret sauce for us. Historically, it was very operationally heavy and critical. One of the things we've really done in this space is we've thought about this a little bit like Amazon, right? Like, hey, we want to deliver this package, but we want to deliver it as touchless as possible. So we've actually taken the whole supply chain in building this analytics and figured out how do we actually make every step in the process completely digital, right? Take every client nuances and actually put that as a code, right? So that is where we've invested massively. And where we want humans to touch is where it is value added intelligence, right? For example, if there is something that fails because there has been egregious movement, we want our quality engineers to really review that. That's where we want our operators to focus on, right? And these are now no longer like generalist operators. They are actually more subject matter operators who actually have command on the subject and they're high value, right? So that's where we've been shifting more and more. What we've been able to do as a result of it, we've been able to massively reduce the footprint of people that was needed. And we started this in the public market, needed to support this. We are now close to 80% touchless. So on a given day, 80% of our operations are actually completely touchless. No human touches it start to end. That has also improved how timely this data is received by people, because obviously there is no idle time in the process. And the other thing, what this has done is we have moved our operators to what we call as a 4+4 model. And this is, so basically we have 6 operational zones. Each operator comes in and clocks for 4 hours and do the operational zone. And the remaining 4 hours, actually, they are focusing on improving process that has either gone wrong or how do they make things better. And this what is retains the subject matter expertise. And this is like continuous Kaizen. You continuously improve the process that you are in, right? This is enriching for the operational people. So because it's not that they're just coming and doing a job, they actually are then assigned to a project where they are figuring out how to make things better. And this has improved our retention. Like back in the days, if you ask me, our average tenure for operational people used to be around 18 months. I think now our operational people are like 3 to 4 years. And so I think it has dramatically shifted. So the value you get out of them is also significantly different.
Wow, this is fascinating. And kudos to you for such a huge improvement. And yeah, Kaizen is the word that I was thinking of when you were describing this. Very classic. And going from how manual it was to 80% touchless is fascinating too. How much of this, Diwakar, involved training people to look for areas of improvement and focusing on automation versus also giving them new tools that they could use in their jobs to enable that automation?
Yeah, so it is fundamentally, first of all, we gave them an operator platform, which is a new platform, right?
Mm.
In how every task is orchestrated, how every task is managed. There is AI built into this operational ecosystem. For example, it knows systematically what jobs to prioritize, what tasks to publish to the person. When it knows based on historical breadcrumbs as to how long something will take, if something is taking longer, how to intimate the client automatically, and things like that. So it is a fairly rich and advanced platform, which was kind of the core, and it was a big shift in getting people to a day one adopt to this platform. And I think the second thing is, honestly, it took a little bit time to gain momentum. And now, as it has gained momentum, people are automatically, with that 4 hour window and everything else, they themselves are finding every single opportunity to digitize it. Our goal is to get to a state where we are 95, 98% stay through processing and there is no human click. So we want to get to that place. And I think I genuinely feel confident we will be able to do that. This process has worked well for us, Vidya. So what is happening is, while public market was the biggest estate, there were other parts of the firm and other parts of the data that were not following the same workflow and the same automation. We are now bringing everything to code to the same. So now we are investing in the private market and bringing private market to the same standard, though obviously there are different challenges in terms of unstructured and how you look at some of those things. I think there is a little bit of a proven aspect that we are trying to rinse and repeat with a little bit of a different flavor for different use cases.
Got it. And when you mentioned operator platform, Devakar, are you referring to OpenAI operator or just some other generic platform?
No, this is a generic, this is a homegrown platform.
Ah,
This is which basically manages all the tasks that people need to do across the ecosystem, and is able to digitize every single aspect and then build an intelligence that needs to be built. So it's not an open AI platform, but it is fundamentally a task orchestration platform. And then it is at every task that it either is not able to move automatically, it is then points to a AI agent to see if it can resolve, or it then exposes to the human. But when it exposes to the human, the key is how does it provide all the necessary context in the most intelligent fashion so that the human can really be able to take the action the most efficient way.
gotcha. So it sounds pretty cutting edge. It's homegrown. It sounds like you've incorporated I mean, AI agents, obviously. So I'm assuming this is not old. This must be all relatively, like, at least not older than 2 years, it sounds like.
Yeah, this platform has come to life in the last 3, 4 years. And I would say we've been investing more on the AI piece in the last 18 months, Vidya. We first focused on the automation and digitization of the core, and honestly, taking all the processes and converting them into code, because that's the hard part, especially when you've been in business for too long. There are a lot of nuances in every process. How do you take all the nuances and actually question which of them should be standard versus which of them should be nuances that need to be codified? So
Gotcha. And just one other question on this topic of the internal platform, because it's obviously you're doing very cutting edge work over at BlackRock, leveraging AI and especially deploying it at scale. This is something a number of large enterprises can only dream of. Because the unfortunate truth is, as I'm sure you've heard and know, it's easy to do some quick prototype, but it's very hard to get it to actually work and work at
yeah.
the scale that you're able to do. So I'm curious to understand because I think there's a lot that other people can learn from your success here. Did you evaluate a bunch of out of the box tools and then decide, okay, we are going to build this in house, piece together a bunch of things that are out there? Is that kind of how you went about? Can you unpack that a bit, please?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we didn't really find a fit for purpose in the market in terms of a true task. Or like if you think about, there are various orchestration platforms where they are in the market. So we use, for example, Airflow and Conductor in different use cases for orchestration of data pipelines and other things, right?
Hmm.
But when we were looking at for the kind of different tasks that we were orchestrating, there was not a tailor-made platform. And whatever we would take, we would have to do a meaningful amount of customization to be able to get to that, right? So that was a part
Hmm.
of building this out. I think the other thing is, Vidya, you spoke about AI successes. I think we've been rather, I would say, simple in our AI journey. Like we have taken very bite-sized increments versus like, trying to go for a big win. We have taken every step and say, okay, what AI small intelligence can we add to every step
Mhm.
versus thinking about like how do we fully reimagine this at some. So I think that has helped us. I think there are places where we want to reimagine completely with AI, but in a lot of places I think honestly before you do AI you need to do the basic process reengineering, digitization, then like basic stochastic or quant, and then you get to AI. So I think like we've tried to follow that journey, and we don't over index on AI if you don't need to use AI.
Gotcha. That all makes a lot of sense. So, switching to the topic of unstructured data, I know you mentioned this even a little while ago in terms of your traditional business, where obviously there's a lot of quantitative data, but also unstructured data that goes into your products, both for external customers and internal users. But I want to bring up unstructured data in a slightly different Gen
Mhm.
AI context. So, I'm referring to the data that is traditionally, at least in the past, has been outside the purview of someone like yourself. So I'm referring to unstructured data that is probably in your emails, in Slack messages, in document storage systems, no matter what you use at BlackRock, things like that. In the past, we were not using much of that, but now with Gen AI, there's a lot of potential value unlock that
Yep.
enterprises can see from it, right? So, question I have for you is the following. I guess maybe the first order thing is in BlackRock, at least, have you all established whether that kind of data does that still sit under IT's purview, or because of the potential for use in new kinds of applications, are you looking at it through your lens as a chief data officer?
Well, I think part of it is we do have a very strong and meaningful collaboration with Microsoft, and
Mm.
we've been one of the early adopters of their Copilot ecosystem, right? So I think we have been partnering with them when it comes, especially with like a lot of the core collaboration tools and other things, on how do we leverage that ecosystem and Copilot in a meaningful fashion. So I think there is one area that we've been partnering a lot with Microsoft in general, right? But I think apart from that, like if you think about the private market, for example, a lot of the data is fundamentally fetched from filing or websites or news, right? And a lot of them actually are unstructured PDF and things like that. So Gen AI is actually sits very squarely in terms of how you use that for extraction. Actually, Gen AI, I would say some of the use cases in my mind where Gen AI is very apt is extraction of this
Mhm.
data
For
set because
sure.
it has taken the complexity of understanding every format of the data set that you're trying to get the data from. So we've been leaning a lot on whether it is in the private market or whether in some of the use cases in the public market where we get like, financials, transcripts, and things like that. So that's a space that we've been trying to heavily invest into.
Got it. So, yeah, I mean, your business is unique in that there is so much unstructured data that is bread and butter for you. So it's not like the other typical enterprises where, they've mostly been, when you think of data, it is for other enterprises, it used to be data that is in data warehouse or, that sort of thing. It's not the case for you. And then it looks like for other kinds of unstructured data, like emails and things like that, your adoption of products from Microsoft that probably dictates how you're leveraging, securing, and basically
Correct.
privacy for those kinds of data. That makes sense. Now, you are embracing AI and you are clearly seeing, and you're also increasing automation. How do you see, like in general, the data infrastructure and architecture for yourself evolving? Granted, you've made some very, very big early decisions which are serving you extraordinarily well, that now you're building a pass. So it's already a very futuristic platform. But if I can ask you to be a little bit more futuristic than you already are, like where do you see this heading? Like in 5 years from now, what are some of the things that you're thinking of that will come to fruition?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, I actually genuinely think that it is tricky for any of us to fully visualize and understand how the world will evolve in the next 5 years. More than ever, I think we are all subjected to a rapid transformation era. And I think the way we can just be prepared is actually making sure we do our building blocks right and get prepared for it. So I think a few things that we are trying to do more and more, like for example, historically we had segregated some of our research and productional use cases, right, of AI to what actually we think about core operational. We are actually blending them together into one ecosystem and one platform because we think that those worlds are going to come together. I think, we also think as you look into your transactional ecosystem, right, I think you will start seeing a lot more AI just embedded into it, right? You're going to get more inference and intelligence as you try to do every transaction, every workflow, and everything else, right? So we see a world where that is going to be more natural on how you've designed your transactional ecosystem to be supporting AI along the way. So your workflows need to be reimagined, your workflows need to be headless in certain areas, right? So I think like those are some of the core tenets in our mind that will allow us and provide us the flexibility. What we're also trying to look at is true service architecture, Vidya. And this is like, how you actually looking at containerization of service architecture across the stack so that you are able to then take different pieces and combine them in different ways, right? Versus like you having to follow a rigid flow. And I think that's between you and me harder. It's harder done than actually said. Like, it's difficult to execute, but if you can truly move and modularize yourself in that fashion, I think you can then easily switch to the use cases that you're trying to drive as well as the openness that you want to drive into the ecosystem.
These are all extremely valuable insights. And if you don't mind, I want to like maybe double click on each of these a little bit more because I think not a lot of us will have all the context of the finance world here. So just going back to the first one, which you mentioned, historically, you said research and production cases are kept separate. Could you maybe give us an example of what a prototypical research versus production use case is and how those two worlds are coming together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, and this applies to any industry. I think if you look at a lot of our data science team across the community, right, they today are able to build models quickly, prototype quickly into a sample data set and come up with inferences that feels like the right model, right? I think the challenge is from there to productionalize those workloads, right? Because either the data set they're using, the model principles they're using, how they are able to operationalize is very different, right? And in fact, some of the insights may or may not feel as valuable. Like I'll give you an example from my past life. When you build a first data science model, it showed you that, hey, you may have an opportunity to save $170 million in inventory. And in isolation it looked great, but actually when you try to put it into production, you like start realizing, oh well, but $60 million of that is tied into a part that has a long cycle time to procure. So yes, you want to have that. So the moment you start putting into an operational ecosystem, you actually see the dilution of that impact of every model that you built, right? And it takes you long for actually taking that research analytical model into production by itself, right? So I think what we're trying to do is giving you that ecosystem of that production grade data and that access into a research ecosystem so that your model build is more meaningful and quick. We also expose you with the right metadata and everything else so that you can actually save a lot of time on the data prep that people spend a lot of time on in the data science community and things like that. But then not only that, if you really then want to build a signal and you find value in the signal, you are able to actually deploy that signal into the production, both in terms of operationalization, but also we built a platform that can directly talk to the ecosystem and raise orders or manage compliance or things like that. So, how do you manage the whole cycle chain where you have a low governed, low fidelity ecosystem with access to key data sets, but at the same time, your ability to promote that into a production grade. I don't want to sound that we've solved all these problems, everything. It's not that we've solved everything. Like, I think there is a lot for us to do too. So, but I think that's the general ecosystem and principle that we've been designing for.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And it is very much in line with keeping this ethos of rapid innovation along with the evolution of technology and AI and code development all becoming more and more democratized. It sounds like this is where things are headed. And then the
Yeah, and I think
second,
I'll say something which
yeah,
may be
please.
unpopular. Like, I think like I'm also a little old school with you. Like, I think from the standpoint of I actually don't think AI is going to solve all your problem. And AI is going to be as good as your foundational layers are. So while we speak about platform, it also comes to data and data model. Like I think, I struggle with everything schema on read. You need to really have a persistent data model that is true and is, logically combined and everything in a meaningful fashion. So if you're not able to use that, I think your how quickly can you build on AI and deploy, I think is going to be limited.
I love your unpopular take. I think it is going to be unpopular. I mean, if it is unpopular, it's only unpopular for a short period of time, but I am pretty sure people who actually know data will be in violent agreement with you. I certainly am. Moving to the second important piece that you mentioned. So, you were talking about transactional ecosystems and how that would change, like how that needs to be reimagined. I was wondering, are you referring to more real time inference, being able to access, like you were talking about this green package your customers get? Are you thinking that there will be some aspects of like a green packet dropping during different periods of the day? Decisions have to be made. Like, what is like a good mental model to think about that?
I think a lot of things will evolve, right? I think there are two, three broad themes. I think maybe with their packed into it, and I think, as I said, there's a lot more. Perhaps we are not able to fully fathom, right? I think one ties to a little bit of what you're talking about, more inferences at real time as people are doing certain things, so that people get more insights along the way, which is more real time and appropriate and persona driven. I think there is going to be that flavor that will evolve, right? I
Mhm.
think what we're going to see in a lot of cases, a much more simplistic UI, especially for a lot of workflow based applications. And you will see a different paradigm on how people interact with the whole ecosystem, where they are also getting a lot of, you'll move more to NLP, right? Like there'll be much more human interaction in terms of what you're trying to do and how you want to do things, right? So that's going to evolve very rapidly. I think the other thing is you're going to move also from humans to systems, right? You're going to see a lot more that is done systematically, which were perhaps in the past done by human operators, right? So in that systematic evolution, where perhaps like make it real, we will see perhaps systems process a lot of your transaction, auto rebalance your portfolio, and things like that, right? And in that kind of an ecosystem, what are you going to see? And this is where the service oriented architecture and other things come into play, is your ability to orchestrate some of those workflows more systematically through APIs, events, and other things, while at the same time you have the same governance embedded into it. Because as you move
Mhm.
systematic, you want to ensure that same kind of compliance and governance is still maintained and you don't lose those things. So I think that is what the next era of evolution is, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one way that I'm thinking about this based on what you mentioned is that we humans, in this previous wave of what we did with data platforms, we figured out a good way for securing things, for leveraging humans to build pipelines, to deliver data and insights. But a lot of the work had to be done upfront, but also on an ongoing manner by humans. What you're saying is that there's a lot of goodness in the principles and how we've done it. Now, can machines take that over while still retaining all of that goodness in how we built the foundations and secured it and all that? But can it automate it at the same time as getting us access to more real time data in a more effective manner and reduce the human side of involvement that is needed? That is.
Yeah, like, and I think with your, like, for example, even when you, and maybe this is if you leave the transactional side, which is obviously more nuanced and specific, right? If you think
Mhm.
about like the generic data pipeline, right? We have today in our ecosystem auto introspection that allows you to understand what the different data attributes are, right? There is intelligence built in terms of, like, as I was talking about, privacy and other things, to be able to field out data of a certain type and see if there are certain data sets and other things that feels risky or other or needs to be vetted out. I think you are going to continuously look for things like schema change, which may come from upstream or other things, and auto adjust your pipelines without having to break it or humans have to intervene into it, right? you're also constantly looking into new relationships, and you're going to create those relationships on the fly versus every human have to model it, right? So you're going to see all of that. Like you will see self-healing, self-preparing, self-contextualizing pipelines, as well as connotation, summarization of what this data is, and all of that come in the future. And some of it is happening as we speak today, right? That I think is going to dramatically evolve in the coming years.
Yeah, this is definitely a fascinating time to be in data. Related quick question. Are there any new technologies that you think are potentially exciting that you've looked at or are looking at?
That's a tough question because I think there is a lot. I don't want to generally name a few like this right now, Vidya, but I think what I would say is we're looking at technologies from a couple of fronts, right? I think,
Hmm.
again, looking at technologies which can help us solve some of the harder problems, right? Like,
Hmm.
for example, if you think about the private market, like master data in a private market is a big challenge, right? So we're looking at a couple of technologies that we think that can help us reduce the barrier to solving some of those problems, right? We're also looking at investing into some of the things that I was telling you in this auto introspection and other spaces, right? Like there are technologies that are there that do it well. So we are looking at a couple of them and how do we integrate into those things, right? So I think there are like the thing is there is a lot of technology right now with the we have more technology than ever right now. I think the
Yep.
challenge is integrating those technology in a seamless fashion and build a coherent platform. So I think that's what we've been mindful for. And I think one other nuance and complexity that we have that perhaps a lot of other people don't have, because obviously we are a SaaS ecosystem, and any technology we deploy, like you have to think about, like we create hundred of instances of the technology and run it.
Yep.
So both in terms of how you manage that technology as well as from a cost and licensing and everything else, there is other implication that we have to think through, which is different. So hence our choice of technology sometimes vary a lot from like what I would choose if I was in G as an enterprise data leader and others.
Gotcha. Yep. It's no small feat balancing all these different priorities. My last question really is about how you do your job being a leader here. Obviously, the data landscape itself has evolved so much, even since your GE days, right? And it continues to evolve. And now there is so much going on in the AI landscape. How do you stay ahead of the curve, Diwakar? And then also, second part of that question is, how do you motivate your team, people who work for you, to also stay on top of new technologies and trends?
Yeah, it is extremely hard with there. Like to be honest, I feel I'm always out of date right now. Like in this world and age, right? Like it's very, very hard to honestly
I feel the same way
stay
too.
connected.
So we're in the same boat.
So yeah, so I think first and foremost, I'm not doing a lot of things right. But I think a few things that helps me is I'm fairly actively involved with some of the startups and I mentor them and things like that. I think that's always helpful because I think that helps you stay connected to some of the innovation that's going along the way. So that's very good. I think the second thing is honestly just having an awesome team. I feel like everybody in my team is smarter than me in their own space, which is very helpful. So, like I think it allows you to always constantly be learning from them and then being able to piecemeal the things together. So I think that's a big part of that ecosystem. I think we've tried to do a few things also, like where we've tried to bring in some startups and have some constant interactions with those people. That has been helpful. As you know, that I've obviously, the first time I interacted with you was because we seeded and funded some early startups. So I think that's something that we continue to do, which has been very helpful. I wouldn't grade myself very high. I always feel like I'm behind on this. So
That's how always humble leaders speak. So, and crediting your team, and I guess that's the only way to also keep learning, right? If we have to take the mindset that we're always on top of things, then we're probably missing out on stuff. Diwakar, thank you so much for your time and willingness to share these insights with us. It was very insightful, especially learning behind the scenes of how you are thinking and how BlackRock is prioritizing product adoption. We're sure that founders will find this very, very valuable too.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Enterprise GTM podcast. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, If you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on your favorite podcast platform so we can continue to help enterprise founders thrive.